Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76, and together we are decoding the deception. We're here today in the book of Genesis. We're going to get a load of this. For those of you who are regular listeners, you will probably find this humorous, but we are going to cover two chapters today, chapters 23 and chapter 24. They have a good bit in common and not in the obvious ways. We need to remember when we read this, we are reading a text that is 4,000 years old. It's talking about things from 4,000 years ago. There are some cultural disconnects for us, and it is incumbent on us, if we are to understand this message, to bridge that gap. That burden is on us. We need to dig in and learn the things about the text, about these people, about their culture that give us insight into what is going on. And we spend a lot of time talking about that here on Decoding the Deception. There was a different worldview that these people had, and when we get insight into that, it makes things that seem pedestrian interesting, because you could look at just the headings on these two chapters. There is death and burial, and then I think the next one is a wife for Isaac, or finding a wife for Isaac, whatever, and it's kind of like, okay, this is going to be exciting. There's not a lot of meat on that bone, but there is a lot of important stuff here. And always remember, the Holy Spirit wastes no ink. If it's here, it matters. And if you don't understand why it matters and you just move on, then you're not doing justice to the text. One other axiom that we use here that is important: remember, this text is written for you. It's written for all believers throughout all time, but it was not written to you. Moses wrote this text to people who lived 3,500 years ago. So we need to dig in and find out what is different. So we'll start. And just time-wise, we've jumped forward in time about 20 years from when Abraham went to offer up Isaac on Mount Moriah. We're about 20 years in the future from that point in time. So another thing, this isn't a biography of Abraham. It's not a biography of the patriarchs. The Bible is not a biography. It is not a history book. It's not even a biography of Jesus. When we're looking for the meaning of Scripture, we need to go to John 20, 30, and 31. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And that applies to the books of the Old Testament as well, because the Old Testament, the 39 books of the Old Testament, are pointing ahead to the coming of the Messiah, and the 27 books of the New Testament point back and say, yes, he came, and this is what he did. So let's jump in. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah, and Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abram went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and a foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Stop there and cover this stuff quickly. Remember, there are these things that we forget. Abram didn't own any land. He was fabulously rich. He was wealthy. They're going to call him a prince of God among them. But he didn't own any land. He wasn't supposed to really own any land yet. Now, buying a burial plot for his wife, that's a different thing. But he was a sojourner here. It wasn't in God's plan for the children of Israel, his grandson, their descendants, to come back and take over the land. That's far down the road. Abraham was rich, blessed beyond imagination, but he didn't have land. He was a sojourner. And you know what that makes him? In comparison to you and me, he's like us. We're sojourners here. This is not our home. Our citizenship is in heaven, from which we eagerly await a Savior, Paul tells the Colossians. We are sojourners here. So if you feel out of place, if you feel like you're not home and you don't fit in, you're in good company. Abraham experienced the same thing. So very important perspective. And Abraham understood that. Abraham mourned. You know, we put these people up on pedestals and we forget that they're human, that they have emotions. He lost his wife. He lost his wife. A horrible thing to go through. And he mourned. And, you know, just real quick, people in the Middle East, in the Near East, they actually mourn. They cry, they weep, they let it all out. We deal with death in comparison very stoically. And I think their way is a whole lot healthier. But he rose up from his dead and he went to the Hittites and he asked them, I want to buy land. I want to buy land. He needed a place to bury his wife. And so in this exchange, we're going to see some interesting things that have more significance if we get the cultural flow here and understand what was going on, who Abraham is and who they are. Who is Abraham? Who were they? Abraham is the one who was chosen by God after he set the nations aside and put them in the care of the B'nai Elohim. Deuteronomy, we probably should just go look at it. Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples. This is Tower of Babel talk. According to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. He found him in a desert land in a howling waste. He found Abraham. He found Abraham and he said, I'm setting all the other nations aside. They're a dumpster fire. I'm putting them in the care of these other gods, lesser spiritual beings, and I'm focusing on one nation through which I can redeem all the rest. Central point in the understanding of the narrative of salvation, and sadly, much of Christendom is unaware of it. The Hittites answered Abraham, Hear us, my Lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. They respected Abraham. They had seen in multiple instances, and they didn't have TV and Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus to distract them. They sat around and they talked about what had gone on and who was who, and they knew that Abraham was blessed by Yahweh. Now, they didn't worship Yahweh, but they knew he was blessed. They could see it. Because a guy who's wandering around without any land shouldn't be that wealthy. Shouldn't happen. Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. The land wasn't his. When it says the people of the land, that means more than we think it does. It was theirs. They were the nation, these nations in that land. And he said to them, If you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place. This is the way you conducted business. Things were done at the gate of the city, and the gate was more than just the gate where you went in and out. There was like a meeting hall, if you will, an open air meeting hall there. And that is where the prominent people would go and sit and conduct business, talk about things, and make decisions for the community. And it is also where you did business transactions. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew this guy has sold this to that guy. And if anything ever comes up about it, the community memory is here. Plus things were written down, but the community memory is here, and we know that this went down. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites. He was right there. In all of this, and I'm going to jump in and interrupt myself. Shocking. Look at how Abraham conducts himself. Part of it is just the cultural way they did things. But there was deference on his part to the people who owned the land. And get this, and the text doesn't talk about it because it assumes we just understand. These people were not good people. They worshiped Baal. They sacrificed children. They were following a deceptive false god, not that the god didn't exist, but a deity that was evil, and Abraham knew that. Go back to Lot. When he brings back the king of Sodom wanted to give him booty from the conquest when the 4 kings against 5. Abraham didn't want it. He goes, let no one say that you made me rich. My blessings come from God. He would defer to them. He was respectful. He certainly didn't want any problems. But it doesn't mean that he liked them. He didn't go hang out with these guys. He didn't go sit with them at the city gate and chew the fat and talk about the sacrifices they were going to make that week. But he is deferential. It's smart. He had to be. Didn't mean that he liked them or approved of who they were. Now Ephron was sitting among the Hittites, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites, of all who went to sit at the city gate, now my Lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the sight of the sons of my people, I will give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed down before the people of the land. Notice he's still, it's the communal thing here. And he said to Ephron in the hearing of the people, but if you will hear me, I give the price of the field, accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there. He's making it clear, I want to buy it. I don't want a gift. I want to buy it. And what their understanding of that is, I'm sure, is different than what Abraham's intention was, but it doesn't matter. They would think, oh, he just doesn't want to look like a beggar and come and asking for something free. But it wasn't that. It wasn't that. He didn't want to be enriched by them. He didn't want to be beholden to them. He didn't want to be in community with them, because there is this big concept. He was supposed to be other. He was supposed to be different. He was supposed to be set apart from all of them. He knew God had taken him to make him and his descendants into a great nation through whom all who followed would be blessed, through whom all people would be blessed. He wasn't supposed to buddy up with these people. He wasn't supposed to go on fishing trips with them. He was different. He was holy. Now again, guess what? Here's something you and I have in common with Abraham. We live in this world and we are surrounded by people who are sold over to materialism, sensuality, greed, whatever. We have to get along with them. We have to exist here. It doesn't mean we commune with them. It doesn't mean that we are one with them. We are to be other. And guess what? It's not easy. Do you think it was easy for Abraham? No, it wasn't easy. for Abraham. Back to this. He wants to buy the field. Ephron answered Abraham, my Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead. So he's saying, and it's that 400 shekels is 9.7 pounds of silver. Do the math at today's value. That's $3,663. Keep that figure in mind for when we get to the next chapter. And Abraham's servant is giving gifts to Rebecca. $3,663. This is pocket change to these people, is what the guy's saying. That's how we would express it. Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out for Ephron the silver that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weights current among the merchants. Right there in front of everybody, he weighed it out. They had common accepted standards of weight that they would use, so everybody could see this is a legit 400 shekels of silver, and he gave it to him. He bought it. Nothing free. No communion connection with these people. So the field of Ephron in Machpelah, which was to the east of Mamre, the field with the cave that was in it and all the trees that were in the field throughout its whole area, was made over to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the Hittites before all who went in at the gate of this city, of his city. That phrase is repeated. Before all who went into the gate of his city. That phrase is repeated. This is legalese for them. That's why it sounds kind of formulaic when you read it. It is structured in a particular way. This is the way they conducted business. Those of you who spend time reading contracts with your work, that stuff just becomes, you know what it's saying. You know the jargon. This was their jargon. And things were repeated this way because most people were never going to own this text. They weren't going to hold it in their hands. It would be read at the synagogue and they heard it, and that way things were remembered because they were repeated. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, east of Mamre, that is Hebron. Time for a map. We love maps. It's called Hebron. It's called Mamre, the oaks of Mamre. Different names given to things. And it could be the Hittites used one name and Abraham used the other. He probably used Mamre and they used Hebron. That is quite likely now that I think of it. And that's why both terms are used. The field and the cave that is in it were made over to Abraham as property for a burying place by the Hittites. So there's more there than just, and it is a key point, and I've probably, because of my attempt to emphasize the cultural and the cosmic geography points here, short selling, sadly, the fact that Sarah died. She's gone now, and Abraham grieved just as we grieve when we lose those who are dear to us. So now, doing pretty good for time, doing pretty well. We get to Isaac and Rebekah, and there's more of this cultural context of understanding. And remember, it's not laid out here because everybody to whom Moses addressed this text knew this stuff. They knew who the Hittites were. They know who the Canaanites are. They understood all of it. If you go and you're looking at the politics in a different country, like for me, looking at politics in Australia, I can't even name off all the provinces. I recognize all the names when I hear them, but to know how the politics work in different regions and what the cultural things are and how the history all plays, I don't know that stuff. In the same way, we've got the same issue going on with the text here. And there's big points along those lines to be observed as Abraham looks to find a wife for Isaac. And we'll start with that. You know, we would say in our day, dude, man up, go out and find your wife. What are you waiting around for dad to find your wife for? It's not the way things were done. The way they viewed the family unit and the way we view the family unit and how it operates, there are points of similarity, important ones, but there are points of difference, completely different. And we'll touch on that, revisit it when we get down to Rebekah going to become Isaac's wife. But guys didn't go find their own wives. Those things were arranged. They were arranged. It's the way things were done. You can say, ooh, that's awful. I hate that. Yeah, to us, it's really odd. Not to them. It's the way things were done in all that part of the world. That was not unique to Christianity. Christianity. To the Jewish people who weren't even Jewish people yet. It was throughout that part of the world, uniform. Now, Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. We're going to see indication of that coming. At this point, that Moses doesn't even bother to lay out numbers of things of how wealthy Abraham was, because he was incredibly wealthy. God had blessed him. And one thing you notice with Abraham, and Abraham has his shortcomings. Abraham has places where he tripped up in the past. We all do. I wish I had as few as are indicated that Abraham had. One of the things that never seems that Abraham had a problem with was wealth. He didn't seem to rely on it. He didn't seem to have it as an idol to him. He just didn't. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to the country, to my country, and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Isaac. Okay. So he's got this servant who has charge over everything he has. That is a parallel, if you will, to the situation with Joseph in the house of Potiphar. It wasn't uncommon. They had a servant who had been brought up in their house, who was almost family, but they knew they were servants. And in one who was faithful and trustworthy, the master would entrust everything. Abraham still had control over it. He let this individual run everything. Trustworthy servant. We're going to see how faithful this guy is and how dedicated to his Lord, being small l, Lord, master, Abraham, that he is later on in the text. Put your hand under my thigh. We could go all over the place with what that is and what that means. Is it just the thigh? Is this a euphemism for something else? It's all speculation. We don't know. We do know that the Old Testament uses euphemism in a lot of places, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time going down that rabbit hole, because at the end of the day, I can talk about it quite a bit and present a lot of information, and we're going to say, but we still don't know. We'll just stick with thigh, because it's not the main point. Although it is of a greater consequence than raise your hand and swear. Promise me. There were other ways Abraham could have done this, and he didn't. This is vitally important. We get the indications, and from cultural study that I'm not going into depth on, that this is about something of vital importance. And the reason we think it might be a euphemism for reproductive organs, and that seems really weird to us, a lot of things seem really weird to us from ancient culture, is that this has to do with the continuation of the bloodline. Okay. He says, swear this incredibly important oath, and it's by Yahweh, Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, Lord, Yahweh, he who causes to be, he's over everything. He's the God of heaven, the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. Is Abraham here allowing for the possibility that he might just die too soon because he's so old? It's probably good business to operate that way. That's probably part of this, but also he knows he's going to send this guy to go find a wife. He's going to send him on this important journey, on this mission, and he wants to make it abundantly clear, no Canaanites, other. They are to be other. Abraham was to be other. This nation was to be set apart, distinct, different, holy. Holy means different, set apart, dedicated to the Lord. And there are all kinds of things that could have gone wrong had they married into the Canaanites. Abraham wanted to go back, and we're going to get indications that his family back there, they also worshiped Yahweh. And I know some theologians might not go along with that, but I think, looking at the text, it's a very good possibility. But I made a list for myself of the different things that could go wrong with marrying a Canaanite, why that is absolutely unacceptable. Number one, the land of Canaan was full of the Rephaim and the Nephilim. We haven't even touched on that one yet, but there were the giants in the land. This is the Canaan, is where that was their hotbeds, which also meant Abraham was living among these entities, these beings who were part of these different communities. It's not that all of them were giants, Nephilim, Rephaim, but they were there. Why doesn't the text tell us that? Why? Why? That's a pretty good, important piece of information. Why doesn't the text tell us that? Well, because the people to whom Moses was writing this knew they were there. You didn't have to tell them. You know, that's like me telling you, now, if you go up there in the northern Wisconsin to that place called Green Bay, you have to remember that there's this football team there called the Packers. You'd look at me like, duh. That's the only thing I know about Green Bay, is that the Green Bay Packers play there. Or, hey, if you go to Mexico, watch out, because you don't want to drink the water and the food's kind of spicy. You'd go, well, yeah. They knew they were there. So you've got that issue. Ties with the inhabitants of the land would entice ongoing union and commingling with them, something Yahweh did not want. Number 3, Canaanites were sold over to Baal. And all of that perverse, sick worship, it appeals to our sinful nature. And if you get any kind of connection, family ties with that, you're going to get swept away by it. And we see that repeatedly throughout the balance of the Old Testament. It's infectious because why is the sin of our world a problem for us? Why can't we just look at it and say, nah, I don't want to have anything to do with that? Why not? Because I like boats, cars, planes, money, and people of the opposite sex. And they're pranced in front of me, all these things all the time, and it appeals to me. It calls to me. Why? Because here in my heart, I got sin. It's an issue. I'm saved from it. Christ gives me the power to resist it and overcome it and have freedom from it, but I'm still tempted by it. And they also were tempted because these false worships involved all kinds of perversion. And finally, that's my last point, the Canaanites were perverts and deviants. Abraham never forgot who he was, what he was about, and why the Lord had taken him there to the land of Canaan. He wanted him to go back, get out of here, go back there, and find a wife for my husband. The servant said to him, and this wasn't, hey, Go online, book a flight on Delta, zip over there, and see if you can find somebody and come back. You know, this was a major journey. It was going to take a while, so the servant wanted to make sure everything's clear, and he's thinking about this. It's a major charge from his master. Perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Seems like a perfectly legitimate question. And he asks it because, do you think this servant, the head of the head of Abraham's household, knew what Abraham was about and what his religion was? Do you think he was also a follower of Yahweh? Yeah. But it's like, hey, if she won't come here, is he supposed to go back there? Because you're sending me back there to get her. Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. As Abraham is thinking this through, as he is explaining it to his servant, where does he go? In this, there's uncertainty, the unknown, and it scares all of us. Where does he go? He looks back, and he sees the Lord walking with him, having plucked him out and walked with him all this time and all the things he has done. And he says, is the God who's done all of that, is Yahweh, going to abandon me now? Are his promises going to fall to the ground? And the answer is no. He will send his angel before you. And his angel, that's a phrase that's used, that's the angel of the Lord, the second power in Yahweh. There were two powers they understood in Yahweh, that one who appeared physically at times. Abraham had confidence, and we're going to see that borne out. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine, but you must not take my son back there. Prime importance. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. We're set to go. Time for the journey. Then the servant, and listen to this, I want you to picture in your mind right now a camel. How much stuff do you think a camel can carry? I heard this funny thing once. A camel is a horse designed by committee. Camels are amazing animals. They're incredibly strong. They can go a long, long time without water. When you're in a dry, arid place, you do not want horses. You want camels. When a camel goes to drink, they can drink, and I'm trying to remember the number, it's something like 20 to 30 gallons of water because it fills up that hump. And they can carry a ton of stuff. They're a little more challenging to work with, but they're amazingly strong animals. Now listen, then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. Going back home. Mesopotamia means land between the rivers. Meso, in between, Potamia, river. Fun with words. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening, the time when women go out to draw water. Notice it doesn't point out that it was a long and arduous journey and that it took some time. You know why? Because everybody who read this at first knew it. You didn't have to tell them. That's like me talking about driving to Seattle. I'm in the North Atlanta area, driving to Seattle. Everybody knows that's a long trip. Okay. It was a set time. Women would go out once it was no longer hot. They would go out and draw water. You knew people would be there, and you knew women would be there. Now, before I go through this, I want to just point out a couple of things. This is the first time in the Bible where someone asks for direct guidance from God. First time. And he gets his answer before he finishes praying. Now, I'm not saying, holding that up as, hey, you do this. You ask God for direct guidance, and he's going to answer your prayer before you're done praying. No. Is this a special case? Has anything in my life ever measured up in significance to this servant of Abraham, the chosen one by God, sending his chief servant to go find a wife for his son so that that line of Abraham could continue on? No, anything in my life pales to insignificance in comparison with that. God is making it abundantly clear he will provide. This is a God thing. That's our terminology today, right? This is very much a Yahweh thing. No mistake about it. He prayed, "O Lord God of my master Abraham." He knew it was Abraham's God. "O Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love." Hesed, that word for kindness and grace that's undeserved. "Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, 'Please let down your jar that I may drink,' and who will say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels,' let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master." Edit. Now, he had just come proverbially off the road, walking and walking and walking. It would be a long way between spots, oasis, between one oasis and another oasis. I don't want to try to do the plural of oasis because I don't know how to say that. That's why camels were so important. They didn't need to drink. But once they got there and they were going to tank up, how much water can they drink? Let's just say at 20. And there are 10 of them? You have to wonder if this guy was also wanting to make sure, and this is tongue-in-cheek, that the servant was wanting to make sure that not only was she the right one, but also that she was healthy and fit, because she was going to lug 200 gallons or more of water for these animals and willingly volunteer to do it. Pretty fascinating. Before, verse 15, before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. Now, this is one of those things that, and it's something I struggle with, keeping all the names straight and who's who, and you read this, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother. What? Who is she? Well, we see Nahor, and we kind of remember that name probably from back in chapter 12. Abraham's brother. Well, here's how this works. She is Isaac's first cousin once removed. She's family. And again, they would marry family. Different than our culture and time and the laws of today. It was definitely from Abraham's people. That's the reason this is stated the way it is. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, notice he picks the pretty one and runs up to her first. Please give me a little water to drink from your jar. She said, drink, my lord. Then she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. That gave him time to think. If you think about it. He's running down, and the way these things work, she had to go downstairs to get to where, and I didn't pull up a picture of this. They cut down to where the spring was, and there were stairs that went down to it. She didn't just run over and dip and carry it over. She had to go up and down stairs to do this. This was one really fit, healthy woman. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels and said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are." We'll stop there. These numbers, what does a shekel mean to you? And you hit the thing and you look there and it'll say, oh, it's 2/5 of an ounce. I find it helpful for myself to run the numbers and do the conversion. This little, with gold being $2,000 today, in today's money, this is an $800 nose ring that he gave her. And so for parents who've got a problem with their kids wearing nose rings, sorry, this was a nose ring, what it is. Okay. And 2 bracelets for her arm weighing 10 gold shekels. So depending on how you look at this, whether the 10 shekels was the total or 10 shekels, each one of them weighed 10 shekels, you cannot determine from the text. You can't. It's one or the other. But these were either $16,000 or $32,000. And interestingly, we think, well, yeah, that's in today's money. No. The way it works is this, and this is a side note. We're going to go into the Creature from Jekyll Island territory and G. Edward Griffin and central banks and real money and fiat currency. Not in depth, but just this. If today $2,000, well, here's the point. Real value of things doesn't change. The reason there's change in value is because money is made up of nothing. It is fiat. They just poof, say there's money when there isn't anything backing it up. Gold has consistent value. If you took an ounce of gold in 1912, the year before the Federal Reserve was created, you know what you could buy with that ounce of gold? A well-tailored men's suit. You know how much a well-tailored men's suit costs today? About $2,000. Kind of interesting how that works. The value, and so 1 ounce of gold, it costs an ounce of gold. The value doesn't change. The value doesn't change. It's just that the currency becomes more worthless, that paper that we pass around. So that just puts the wealth component here in perspective. This was huge money, and it blew her mind. You didn't just hand this stuff out, and plus it was exorbitant. It was over the top, and he's got 10 camels of it. Another thing. Why? We'll talk about that more as we move on. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? Do you think she was going to say no? First of all, it was basic courtesy in the day, how you did things. Number 2, this guy's loaded. Why would you say no? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. He added, we have plenty of both straw and fodder for the animals and room to spend the night. The man bowed his head and worshiped the Lord, Yahweh, and said, Blessed be Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, Yahweh has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman. Now, when she heard Abraham, she knew who he was because they talked about family. This girl could tell you, she could tell you, I am Rebecca, the daughter of, the daughter of, the daughter of, the daughter of, going back dozens of generations. They understood who they were by their descendants. She knew who Abraham was. They knew family history and family lineage. Then the young woman ran, understatement, and told her mother's household about these things. This was big news. Abraham's servant showed up. She's running back with these bangles on her arm of pure gold and a nose ring and saying, he's here. And it sent a message. We're going to talk about that. Rebecca had a brother whose name was Laban. Laban's going to be a character for a while, a player for a while, even with Jacob. Laban ran out toward the man. Notice he ran to the spring. As soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms and heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, thus the man spoke to me, he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, come in, O blessed of, what is that? There, I'm going to hover over it and look way down at the bottom. If your eyes are, Yahweh. Laban is talking about Yahweh. We're going to see that a few times, at least a couple times. Indicator. They're aware of Yahweh. They're probably worshipers of Yahweh, or at least familiar with Yahweh. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. So the man came to the house and unharnessed the camels and gave straw and fodder to the camels, and there was water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Then food was set before him to eat. But he said, I will not eat until I have said what I have to say. He said, speak on. This guy was all about the mission. He was on task. He was going to stay on task. I'm sure he was fairly hungry. They'd been eating rations, basically, while they journeyed. Notice there were men with him. You don't go anywhere with 10 camels without a whole bunch of guys to take care of and manage those camels. Now, I'm going to read through this fairly quickly, and then we'll talk about the main points. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and to him he has given all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my clan and take a wife for my son. I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said to me, the Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel and you with you and prosper your way. You shall take a wife for my son from my clan and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my clan, and if they will not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. I came today to the spring and said, O Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, and I'm going to skip over this because he just repeats what he said. And it's not that it's not important. They repeated things because they were making things clear, but for the sake of brevity. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came with her water jar on her shoulder, and then she did everything that he had said. Everything went just the way it was supposed to go. That's what he's saying. Then I bowed my head and worshiped Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you are willing, if you are going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. Just basically so I can know what to do. So we've got Laban and Bethuel here, and they answered and said, the thing has come from the Lord, from Yahweh. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. They were good with this. Now, to us, again, this seems rather just quick on their part. The load of stuff that he brought, it was two things. It was his bona fides. This guy can take care of your daughter. She's going to be okay in a big, big way. You're not going to have to worry about whether she's going to go hungry or be able to feed her children. It's going to be okay. That was part of it. The other thing is, it is a bride price. And an exorbitant one, but a bride price. When there was an exchange, there were members of the household, and just for common people, there was a bride price, right? There was a bride price. And what it did, she was leaving the family. It was the family unit. Everything was about the family unit. Today, it's not all about the family unit. Satan hates the family unit. He's been working forever to try to destroy the family unit, and he has done it much harm, and look at where society is as a result. With them, everything was about the family unit, and each member of the family had value to the family unit. And if your daughter was going to go away, who could have been there doing her part for the family, doing her chores for the family, going out and making water, making bread, helping feed the workers out in the fields, all of those things, she was going to be gone. Financial compensation was given. It's not that she was property. They didn't think that way, but it was about the effect on the family unit. See, they thought about things differently. Whether you think it's right or wrong, that's the way they thought. They were assured, number one, this is a really good situation for Rebecca. Number two, it's family, and he's loaded. So she's going to be okay. She's going to be better off than being here. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord, and the servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. Bride price. Okay, so I'm going to go fast because I'm trying to get this done on time. I don't want to go too long. I do encourage you, go back and read over this, but he stays the night and he gets up the next morning. He's ready to roll. They're probably already packing the camels, even though there's not much to go on them other than provisions for the return trip. He said, let the young woman remain with, he said, I want to go. Send me away to my master. Her brother and mother said, let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that, she may go. Kind of a big farewell thing that they would have, a cultural thing, a good thing. But he said to them, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. He was eager because he cared about Abraham. He wanted to let Abraham know this is all good. It's been blessed by the Lord, and he can't wait to tell Abraham. For selfish reasons, he probably would have liked to stay for 10 days. He didn't want to get back on those camels and ride for days and days and days. They said, let us call the young woman and ask her. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. So they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant, and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him. That is exactly what the Lord blessed Abraham with at the sacrifice, almost, of Isaac in 22:17. Okay, going to go through this quickly. They get on the camels. They're going back. They come, and Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel and said to the servant, who is that man walking in the field to meet us? The servant said, it is my master. So she took her veil and covered her face. Israelites did not cover their faces. Women didn't have to wear veils, but it was part of the bridal ceremony that they would wear a veil. That's why she put the veil on. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Now, I want you to pay attention to this ridiculously exorbitant wedding plan. Ready? Here we go. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. That's it. They're married. No hoo-ha, no hoopla. And I'm not saying that those things didn't develop in Jewish culture as time went on. They did. But at its core, this is it right here. But a happy ending to a very important quest that would make sure that the pieces were in place for God to continue his promise through the next generation. And God's the one who put all those pieces in place. He's the one who made all of this happen. We're going to stop there. A lot of good stuff in that section, a lot of material that we covered, and we did get it done. 2 chapters in one session. This is Messiah 76 together. We are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.